The tremendous chef talking with us today, Andrew Carmellini, right around in about 2 minutes. As an ILC board member and one of the partners with Andrew and Stephen, I'd like to get some of the notes taken care of at the beginning of our live session. So on Monday, we have Bashar Wali will go live with John Grossman, president of Grossman Company, real estate properties, hotels mainly all over the country. Andrew, I see you there. I'll pick you up in 1 second. We also have on Wednesday, Tony Cho of Metro One Magic City Innovation District joining. He will speak to us about wellness and spirituality in the hospitality industry. And finally, an alum from my college, Peter Mack, founder and CEO of Collective Retreats. If you guys want to go outside and stay intense in this intense COVID environment, he's the man that you want to be staying with. As you guys know, we have a ton of programming. We're all over social media. The followers, the folks who come to our conferences, which obviously we're not doing during this COVID environment, we're very thankful. And we're very thankful for your donations. And we appreciate if you can just keep them up. They've been really supportive to the organization, and I think we're entertaining later in the year doing some outdoor, smaller conferences, which we're thinking through day to day. Also, please keep in mind, there's obviously not just one crisis going on, but Black Lives Matter, and all that each of us can be doing to support that movement is also important to us in the ILC. Here's Andrew. Let me beam him in. Here we go. Andrew, the delay in the internet. Okay, there we go.
Hey man,
how are you?
how you doing?
Good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, all good.
So we've been doing these now since March, probably about 100 days, I guess, of being digital. ILC, as you may recall, has a platform that travels around the country and does these small conferences for the independent hospitality world, so restaurants
Sure.
and hotels. And when this thing hit, we decided there's only one place to go, and that's digital. And so we've been doing these sessions multiple times a week. And so thank you for joining us.
Yeah, man, good to be here. Good to see you're alive and well.
Yes. You know, there's no response to that other than exactly that. It's been a little bit frustrating for us in the hotel and restaurant world because I think those two sectors have been the hardest hit. And I think the restaurant sector in particular, people understand when you aren't traveling, you're not going to hotels because of the pandemic and so on and so forth. And it's bricks and mortar, the Marriott will always be there, so on and so forth. I don't know if people understand that restaurants are a little bit different, but we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. It's been 100 days. How has this impacted you personally as a business owner, multiple outlets, New York City all the way down to Baltimore?
I mean, I know it's a hard question to answer, of course, but it's an evolving one. I mean, certainly the shock of it. I mean, we're well past like what happened on March 15th is the day of infamy in my world.
Yeah.
It's more just about, it was the first 3 days of like kind of like shock to like, okay, we have to, figure out what to do from the top down. It's kind of why I got involved on the political side of things right away. There was this moment on Monday after we all shut down, which was probably like the 18th of March, that I saw the current administration giving a press conference talking about bailing out the cruise industry.
Yeah.
And it was about 5 minutes after that I had Colicchio and Zimmerman and a couple other people on the phone, and we formed the IRC, which is the Independent Restaurant Coalition, which is huge now. It's a massive organization with lobbyists in Washington, and it's well beyond my individual scope, that's for sure. and has done some really good things to help make the federal government on the Senate level and the House level understand what our business is.
What
Because
do
I don't think there was an understanding of what the business is, how many people we employ, how much tax revenue we generate, and what the supply chain is of our business.
right.
And I think we did a good job initially making sure that it was understood, the business as a whole, what we represent as far as employment and tax revenue.
So was it more quantitative in the sense that you're just giving them numbers? Hey, look at these numbers, or was there a qualitative component to it as well?
Well, in the beginning, in the beginning, as it relates, it was especially the cruise industry because you know how the amount of people we employ in this country versus the amount of people that industry employs in this country, and also certain facts like only 75% of the industry hourly wages make $2 an hour, and how the aggregate tax level of individual ship and what comes back to this country. And so making sure that those things were understood of what we bring to the table and how important it was for the federal government to step up some way and to think about how big the restaurant industry needed to be taken care of in the CARES Act, because no one really represents us as a whole. There's the National Restaurant Association, and not to dismiss their work, but that's more of a corporate level kind of advocacy more than an
Right.
independent restaurateur advocacy or chef-driven restaurant group advocacy, which is what we represent. So that really kind of like drove me personally into action to make sure that was done, and we were successful at it the best we can. Especially we were nobody to start.
Right.
So
Is
and we're in kind of recovery opening mode, trying to figure out the best runway to get the openings done in a safe manner and a successful manner,
right.
the best we can. And as you know, there is no recipe for success right now on that.
And so let me step back for 1 second. Quantitatively, the numbers speak for themselves, but do you think that the government understands how culturally significant restaurants are to us in terms of being the glue that really has?
I mean, I would think I've had a lot of calls with senators and House members, something that usually wasn't on my to-do list on a
Right.
day-to-day basis. It's don't think policy work is my strong suit, that's for sure.
No.
But I have been there, and I would say that that's a luxury. What you're talking about
Yeah.
it's a luxury for someone on the lawmaking side to understand the cultural significance more than
Yeah.
necessarily the unemployment or how that relates to their own constituent kind of situation. I think it's like frankly we're in dreamland if we think that that's a consideration,
Wow.
even though we know that and we live that every day.
Yeah.
But I think it's now on the city level or state level that might be different, but
Yeah.
definitely on the federal level is not a consideration.
I mean, I
Sorry
don't
to be pragmatic about it, but
no, but I don't want to digress too far, but
sure.
if the hive, the mothership, or whatever you want to call it, the federal government doesn't understand the significance of restaurants to our people, to our communities, to our country, like that's a pretty big flaw on multiple levels.
Well, not
And
everyone has.
they're
Not,
rushing to
not,
the cruise ships and the planes. Like
I mean,
that's,
again, not
I've never
not.
sat on a plane before and sat next to somebody and got off that plane and been like, wow, that was the best plane ride I've ever had. You just don't say that. Like it's not conducive to
Well,
that
not
sort of
everyone.
behavior.
Not. I mean, it's safe to say that not everyone has the same relationship to food and dining like maybe you or I have, and even and I don't say that from a socioeconomic point of view. I say that from both a professional and maybe how you were raised or how you grew up type of view. And I think it's important to recognize that not everyone feels that way.
Right. But there's a significant portion of the population even there's a significant portion of the population um, that does understand that, and
Sure.
things have changed over the past 30 years. Things have changed constantly for the better for the restaurant industry in the sense how restaurants have become literally a part of culture. In the past, they were just sort of on the fringe of culture. And when you went out to eat, it was always a special occasion. It wasn't something that you were doing regularly. I mean, now dining regularly, wherever it is that you're dining, is just a part of who we are. And for the federal government not to recognize that as a significant part of our culture, anyway, we're on the same page. And so when things I want to step back. When things shut down in March, everyone was in this, like, what are we going to do? We're waiting, we're watching the curve with Cuomo and so on and so forth. Curve is flattened, things are beginning to reopen. What is a typical restaurant owner in an urban center like New York City? What are they looking at right now?
I mean, I think that New York City is in a very different place than most the rest of the country. I can say that for sure. As I talked to some of my friends around the country, I visited my parents recently and took a road trip to go see them, and it's just very different. You know, I live in downtown Manhattan, and it's pretty bleak. Now it's starting to come out of that, but you know, a lot of people that have second homes or are not in the city, people we know, even longtime, you know, hardcore New Yorkers that have been living in East Village since the '80s, that are in the arts and are really part of the scene and that are friends of ours. They've bolted also. You know, they've rented, they're out there, they've rented stuff out in Maine, they're gone. So I mean, the volume of people is down. So New York is a completely different. It's a completely different. That's why we have been pretty cautious about the reopening and takeout and everything, both from a financial part and the safety part. But you know, it's opening up to do a couple grand a week. I mean, a couple grand a day in takeout. I don't know, even with the, you know, PPP and all this other stuff, we've been very cautious about it. It's also the middle of the summer. So we just started reopening Westlight, our rooftop bar at the Williamsville, and had a gangbusters night yesterday. We opened, it was great. We have outside tables only, 10 feet between each table, lots of rules, but we're out of reservations until Monday now. So. Wow. Which is nice to see, but it's a special place with a great view, and it's outdoor dining, so it's kind of a special location. So
New York City is 50% now, right? 50% of your capacity.
No, not inside. That's going to happen on July 6th.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, July 6th.
I think I'm on the North Fork right now. I think perhaps you may be as well.
Yeah,
we just opened last night one of our restaurants out here. 50% capacity. Okay.
Yeah, New York City's not there yet, which is part of the thing about outdoor dining in the city, is that we, you know, as someone that has a lot of outdoor dining regularly, I know that if the weather turns bad, like your service can go poorly very, very quickly. And if there's anyone to go and no place to close out checks, then, so we wanted to wait at least till we have access to our dining room publicly that we could do something. So some things in July, we're going to start to open a couple more things slowly. I think Locanda, Verde probably next month gets open, the Greenwich Hotel, because the Greenwich is going to open, and then we'll probably, everything else, hopefully, as long as New York stays in a good place, I hope, for the rest of the summer, we're going to be looking at kind of September openings for everything.
And so, what is the adjustment to an owner-operator of a restaurant in New York City? Like, is it a question of going back to the landlord? Is that where people are figuring the most relief will come, or is it hope with the funds that has it been passed? There's $120 million or $120 billion in a relief fund. I don't.
The rest. It's the Restaurant Act is, again, that's work directly from my IRC group, and we have gotten it to the floor, which is. I don't even know. It's unbelievable that we did this, and if that passes, that'll be a big help for a lot of people. And it's interesting how they're structuring it, because they're structuring in a very fair and equitable way, also, which is good. So it just doesn't get sucked up by, you know, multinationals. Right. It's interesting how they're gonna structure it. That will definitely help. But listen, this is macro level stuff, you know, and it's important, but it's really on a micro level that, like you said, and, you know, landlord, vendor, you know, have those relationships you have your landlords, the relationships you have your, there is a sense I get from most people that everyone is in it together.
Hmm.
And, you know, our landlords, you know, understand that. Now, what that means when we open and money starts to have to change hands, and there's going to be negotiations, of course, but it's not just really negotiation about, you know, being closed or back rent or forbearance or forgiveness, or it's about really renegotiating for the future,
Yeah.
because there's the near future and there's the near short-term future,
Right.
and both of those will not work on any model that exists for kind of a rent matrix, probably for most people. So I would suggest that if there's anybody on the call that's an owner operator, you should definitely, it's about negotiating the past as best you can, but also negotiating the future.
Right. And so the assumption is that things will be the way they will be until there's some sort of vaccine or something. Is that's the end of it, or how are you looking at it?
I think it's probably four phases, to be honest with you. I think there's the pre first phase vaccine. Um, I don't think the first vaccine is going to be effective as everyone wants. At least that's what a friend or a couple of friends that are in biomedical have to say about it.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other discussion, maybe for another another video. But and I think there's you know, I would say, yeah, the post second vaccine kind of wave, which is going to be hopeful, but there's still going to be some economic issues around.
And so
Um,
a typical restaurant in New York City is going to be operating at reduced capacity for a while.
sure.
I mean,
I
that's
think so. And I mean, the biggest impact, I think, the biggest impact, reduced capacity, but I think the biggest profitability impact is going to be private dining and events. Um, it's a significant part of our revenue, and I think most hotel revenue for, you know, private dining events, weddings, bar
right.
mitzvahs, corporate events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which we're very good at. We do quite a bit of, and, you know, not be able to have that revenue is going to be a big kind
Yeah.
of adjustment. That's for sure.
And there's
Um,
nothing that really can be done about it because it's social distancing. You're
yeah,
saying,
there's nothing to be done about it. It's pretty safe to say, especially with you know, the news out of the South, that you can't do it.
no,
Maybe outdoor events can be done.
right.
That seems to be, but it seems to be yeah, in mass indoor, especially with like dancing and that kind of thing, is out of the question for now.
And so, what can folks do to help the industry other than donate and support the causes, the lobbying, and so forth? I know that out here at the Soundview hotel that I'm at right now, one of our friends at Death and Co, David Kaplan, he closed. His bars are closed. His folks were not employed, and we said, "Hey, let's put our heads together. Why don't we do like a residency? We'll bring some of your
Sure.
team on, and something that we probably wouldn't have done in the past, but like that's one thing I thought would help. We're doing a chef series. We've got 5, 6 chefs coming out to cook. We're trying to do those sort of things. Are there other things that you're hearing that people are?
I mean, listen, everyone's going to have to get a little scrappy,
Yeah.
you know, to be honest with you. And I think, you know, there's my biggest wish. It's interesting because most of the great, I love music. I'm a big music person, play a lot of music, besides cook a lot. And my wish for the last recession was there would be a really great brand new music genre that popped out of it. Because if you look historically,
Yeah.
usually some of the great, you know, new kind of like branches of the trees happen during depressed times and economically depressed times. Unfortunately, the best thing we got out of 2008 was EDM, which it's not really a big cultural significance, fun sometimes, and you know, good to take drugs to, but not like, it wasn't like, you know, hip hop in the early 80s, or
Right.
you know, the late 60s, or you can track them back as long as you want. Usually happen in economic depressed times. But for like people in the food business, I think it's going to be you're going to have to get a little scrappy, and I think it's going to be definitely some collaboration work, definitely because it's going to be smaller because of this loss of revenue just about everywhere. There's going to be smaller teams,
Yeah.
smaller. Less, we're looking for less contact. There's gonna be just less layers of service, less layers of management.
Right.
And there's gonna be two realities: the COVID reality and the economic reality.
And so some of the things that I've been suggesting on these, when I have these conversations with folks like you, I suggest if municipalities can just be a little bit more flexible on allowing restaurants to come together and outdoors, parks and things could be closed for restaurants during a certain number of days a week, or loosen up the rules on food trucks.
Is that a direct request to the township of Southold?
I wasn't going to name any direct requests, but yeah, I mean, like just loosen up on the food trucks. I've got friends out here who are just like, the things have been, the screws have been tightened during this environment. So I don't know. All I know, and you may say, Eric, it's just still too small to have, a restaurant existing 3 days a week on a park, down the street or something. That may be true, but I'm just trying to encourage folks to also think out of the box. And
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, well, if like locally, I mean, they would have to start with agribusiness. Also, I know that
yeah,
and there's a lot of regulation when it comes to agribusiness, and a lot of my friends that are in the farming community deal with a lot of kind of ridiculous regulation and red tape that shouldn't exist. Listen, in New York State, there's a lot of things that need to change. I think the model in general, the fact that the 80/20 rule exists in New York State, but has been repealed federally, is a huge burden for any operator. And frankly, it's a huge burden on staffs because it basically changes the dynamic of and the camaraderie of working together in a restaurant, which is why I got into it, because it was fun and there was great teamwork. And I think that's a role that I think, post this kind of, these pushes we are for regulation as far as recovery, I think there needs to be some new, very fair regulatory things that happen with tipping and 80/20, and it just doesn't. It's arduous, and it doesn't make sense for operators. So yeah, there definitely needs to be a new level playing field, I think, for operators. Yeah.
and are those things going to happen, or do you think things get better before those things happen? I mean, I see it as an opportunity to reset and make things happen so that the industry can be better when it comes out of it. Sort of like, well, do you think that's possible?
I mean, it's only possible if enough smart people get behind it to advocate for it.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've learned, in this time, is that if it's just me or some other mid-level restaurant group or just one other chef, or it really needs to be, to understand, make on the legislative side, kind of understand a unified voice, and what that is, and what that represents.
Right.
Because that's the only way to get those types of things done, and it boils down to money and power, right? And individually, there's not much there, but collectively, there is.
Yeah.
And it's important to think about that.
Can you talk about the food supply chain for a second?
Sure.
The impact, and I've been spending a lot of time out here over the past however many months between here and Brooklyn. And it's really interesting to see the farmers that I'm connected to out here are like Ira's, KK's. He's been selling out more than he ever has in the history of his farm in terms of the folks who is a cooperative, which I always thought he sold out because he has such amazing product, but he said no, it's been incredible for him. And I keep hearing that over and over again with the different farmer friends out here. which makes me think that are people beginning to realize, Andrew, the importance of local and the importance of being able to
Well, I
have
think
this relationship with their farmers?
it's a combination of a couple things, and seeing that firsthand, like you saw. One is that, I've been in the North Fork of Long Island for 12 years now, and there's a lot of people that are here. Even for the summertime, it's not like the Hamptons. There's not. I'll tell you that there's not wall to wall traffic. Um, it's
Well,
not.
you don't want to tell you don't want to
It's
tell people that.
no. That's not what it is. But it's the busiest I've ever seen it here. And
Hmm.
in my neighborhood, that in April, because we're here every weekend or every Sunday and Monday, depending. There's when it's pretty sleepy, just my one or two neighbors that I know around. In April, there were people all over the place, dressed much nicer than they usually are.
Right.
So the demographic changed and the volume changed a lot, and given that there was just more people around to go to the
Yeah.
farms, and there was a panic about supply, which was that was a legitimate thing. Locally we saw in the grocery stores, the more mainstream kind of outlets, there wasn't a lot of product around.
Hmm.
Not just toilet paper, regular items that you
Yeah.
saw are kind of like off-brand vegetables, or so that was the thing. I stocked up like a good chef about 2 weeks before it all happened, so we uh, we were super spoiled for like 2 months at my house.
Right.
Um,
But you think it's because of that, not necessarily because people are understanding just sort of the value of being connected to where your food comes from, which is
Again,
nothing
maybe
new.
maybe it's just been my mood yesterday, so not to be like the pessimist between us
Okay.
about it, but the I think it had to do with the volume issue. I really do. Um, One of our mutual friends, um, uh, who's a farmer, and sells a lot of products, said she goes, I had Southport people calling me with huge orders
Yeah.
that I never heard of before. Again, I think that's it was a volume issue.
Yeah.
And like listen, if you can afford it and you can afford a farm raised chicken, for
$4 a pound.
$24
Yeah.
instead of
Six.
instead of paying six at the market, and that's what you want, that's what you're used to,
Right.
it's there. But
Okay.
that's my view of it.
Well, I'm still going to be hopeful though
Oh
that
yeah, no,
that people have recognized that, hey, there's something here going on where nature has really gut punched everybody and said, sit back, relax, stay in your homes for a long period of time, stop going out, focus on what's going on around you, and then all come together with the collective realizations that this world can be a better place if we do certain things, right? And one of those things I'm hoping comes out of this is there are a lot more minds that are like, hey, when I was reading about those uh, factories that butcher the pigs and the cattle, and there's only like 7 of them in the country because of these really strange laws that don't make any sense at all. Maybe we need to think about how we reorganize how our food is getting to us. And not just because I couldn't get my hot dogs, but
right.
because maybe this is not the right way to exist.
I
Anyway,
mean, no, it's the supply chain thing is interesting topic, and something I've talked about 30 years ago, and
does
it
this go
was
back to Ohio?
no, this goes back to my first coming to New York,
Okay.
and because I came to New York in '90, and just kind of like with my when the food scene was very small and kind of like a bunch of geeks, and not a lot of Americans doing it.
Hmm.
Um, there's always this talk about make organic was now we take it for granted, but was kind of like a big issue and very very difficult to find.
Yep.
And you know early on, I always said this, much to the dismise to um, to other people, is that it doesn't matter if my small chef-driven restaurant buys 100 pounds a week of organic tomatoes. I'm
Hmm.
privileged to be able to do that, and I'm it's a privilege to have customers that want to pay the extra money for it.
Yeah.
If you really want to make a difference on a national level, it's when Olive Garden decides
Yeah.
that they're going to buy, because volume impacts that the most, and how those like systemic things happen, you
Right.
know. And uh, McDonald's moving to antibiotic chicken parts for chicken McNuggets was probably the biggest food news like 2 years ago that you could ever think of. That most people in our sector of business, you know, kind of like just maybe brush off, or it's easy to pass on. But really, for everyone across the socioeconomic span, is the most impactful thing that's ever happened. You know,
Yeah.
Costco selling made the decision to sell organic produce like
Yeah.
4 years ago, whatever it is, and they have that whole section. That's huge, because then that's a way for people that shop at Costco regularly, or Walmart, or whatever those streams are, to have access to that food in possible food deserts is way more impactful than spoiled guys like us.
Well, what is the inflection point? You know, if you look at the population and just the general education of the population and the knowledge that the general population has of why organic and even biodynamically raised organic is important. Do you think 100% of the population knows that? And is that the math that the Olive Garden is doing to determine whether or not when the day is they'll bring
No,
organic tomatoes on
and
sale?
listen, like the term natural wine, it's very murky waters between organic and bio and ethically raised and
Yeah,
natural raised, and there's a lot of marketing terms out there.
yeah,
Um, my general feeling about it is that any progress is good progress in this. I think that the general population from 30 years ago has come very, very far
yeah.
in kind of like the awareness of kind of what they're eating. But at the same time, I have a fairly, well-to-do brother-in-law that could easily afford all the organic produce he wants, and that is like 100% thinks it's a complete waste of money and it doesn't mean anything. So, we make our food choices where we want, and we believe,
You
what we
should,
want.
Andrew, you
Um,
should take him on a tour of Eight Hands Farm with Tom and Carol. I've converted the hundreds of people to sustainable organic just by taking them on that tour and having them experience firsthand. It's very interesting.
Oh yeah, no, of course. I mean, I believe it's just some people are in tune with it, and some people are not. Again, it depends on how you were raised and where your value system
And the
is.
pandemic's not going to
My
change.
I no, I mean, listen, I listen. We had no money growing up, and we had a lower middle class upbringing, no
Hmm.
complaints whatsoever. My parents were great, but we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't go to big restaurants or anything. Like, there was no foodie culture, growing up. And uh, my parents, they wanted good food, and good food for them was it just didn't have any crap in it.
Yeah.
There was like just no preservatives. They wanted the whole natural food all the time. We had a garden in the back, and they weren't hippies, not even close.
Hmm.
Not even close to that culture. It's just that between the two of them and the way they were raised, half Polish and half Italian, that just transcended into, like, there was no junk. I mean, yeah, there was ice cream once in a while and stuff like that, but we were never allowed soda pop. We was like, chips would be like a big deal if we ever got it. There was no sugar cereals. There was no anything like that. So there was this, there was always a sense of, eating well.
Yeah.
And eating well just meant like no preservatives, fresh food, no luxury. And I think that was a good baseline. So for me, that's a like an important value to me, and I cherish that, and that's why I do what I do. Um,
But that's what I was hoping is that when people are sitting in their homes for the past 100 days, not able to go out and do all these things, that they're sitting there and they're eating their food and they're looking at it more closely than they ever have, and they're saying, "Wow, I'm really eating that." And hopefully, like, there is a moment as part of what Mother Nature is probably telling us. Like, there's a moment, wow, I don't even know what half those things are. Maybe I just take a step back, and this time when I go to the grocery store, I'm going to try maybe half the ingredients but the same product and see how it
yeah,
tastes. And Anyway,
Also, I think there's a lot of people that realize how much work it is to do every day, and they can't
oh
wait for
yeah,
restaurants to get back, which is good news for me and you. But
it is.
it's like,
It is. And so a couple more quick questions.
yeah, sure, no, shoot.
Restaurant culture, uh, dining out culture, obviously it's changed physically. Um, Sunset Beach example, not opening. I asked some friends over there, well, why not? Well, we can't create the scene if we've got, spacing of 50% of the tables, 50% of the bar, so on and so forth.
Sure.
The scene has changed. In some people, the scene is very important, and I completely understand that. Other places, like our restaurants that we have, it's more about just making sure that the people staying in our hotels or in the communities in which we exist, they have a place to dine out and can sort of let the weight off their shoulders of everything that's going on in the world. And it'll probably be that way for a while. Do you think that there's going to be any change in once COVID is over? Do you think there's any change culturally to how we're dining, or is it just going to go back to where it was? I can't think through how that far.
I think that once COVID is over, listen, no one likes a quiet restaurant,
Right,
at least New Yorkers,
right.
and I think that's probably going to be the same once COVID is over.
Yeah, it'll be
I think
back.
there's a reflection point now, and kind of everyone thinking inward, and but I think that that most people want to walk into a place that like feels good, and people are going to take care of it. And that necessarily doesn't mean like seven deep at the bar, although sometimes it does. It
Right.
just means that you feel like you're going out, and you feel like you're, which is amazing. It's like. Being in the restaurant business, like my wife and I, we would have dinner inside. If we're in the city, we would have dinner at our apartment maybe once a week, and that was delivery.
Right.
We would definitely have dinner together outside twice a week, and then otherwise, she would do her thing during the day or out with friends at night, and I was at the restaurants at night, and
Right.
that was life. Unless we were, out in the country, then we're definitely cooking like crazy.
Right.
Um,
And
So
it'll be back.
maybe there'll be a balance more in the future where we can have some meals at home, but most of our meals outside.
Well, I was on a couple weeks ago with a guy, Jason Pomerantz. Perhaps you've heard of him, old friend, and he
He's
he.
tried to he's tried to get me involved in a lot of things. Yes.
Yes, he's very persuasive sometimes. And he said, Eric, I think that the dining in culture is, we're going to really understand how valuable that is. And he said, I would suspect that dining in culture is going to be pretty normal during COVID. And I think that it's going to solidify to the point where after COVID, people are really going to value dining in.
Hmm.
Um, because of the connection to the things that they were forced to do during the heat of the heart of the pandemic, hopefully struck some chords with them internally, and those chords will be sort of set going forward as like dining in isn't that bad of a thing. And if we can have some people over and keep it quiet and everyone is socially distanced and so on and so forth, that may be something culturally that shifts coming out of it. I thought that was an interesting answer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like if anything I can say like is that it's very hard to predict what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Every for a while there, maybe like a month ago, whether it was the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Post, or whatever, almost every day there would be a new article like New York City's over. No one's going to go
Right.
out anymore.
Yeah.
Everyone's fleeing for Wisconsin.
Right.
And it's all sensationalist. And I know that when we closed down, any plan that we had at 9 o'clock in the morning was completely erased by 3 o'clock in
Yeah.
the
By three.
afternoon
Yeah.
for
Yep.
2 weeks straight. And
Yep.
even recently, we've had certain roadmaps for opening or certain roadmaps to get certain markers in place, and they've changed. So I think there's no way to predict what's going to happen, and it's just about being flexible and fluid as much as you can.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah,
So thank you, by the way.
yeah, good hang, man.
I appreciate this. And the folks who have been viewing also appreciate it. There's not many times when we can talk to somebody who has the purview that you do with what's going on, and it's very special for you to join us. So thank you again.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Um, I'm going to hang up now, Andrew. I'm going to go through a couple housekeeping things here that my team has asked me to go through. And
Catch you
Andrew,
later.
hopefully I'll see you on the beach at low
Yeah, I'm gonna
tide.
go. I'm gonna go see Death and Company. Love those
You should
guys.
you should. I'll text you later.
All right.
Thank you again.